poverty as they, as they struggle to provide all that they wish for their children's health and well-being. And as you will have realised, our brilliant facilitator for this evening is Brian O'Toole. And Brian works with the Presentation Sisters, and welcome to so many Presentation Sisters who have joined our Zoom meeting this evening. And Brian is director of the Interprovincial Justice Desk, and we're very fortunate to have Brian as a member of the exec committee of NJPN. He brings a wealth of experience in lots of areas and has been instrumental in facilitating our other webinars as well during our Jubilee year. So I'm very happy now to hand over to Brian, who has the bulk of the hard work to do.
Thanks indeed, Anne. And just to say, really, I suppose that what we have, the reason for this evening, or the point of coming together, as Anna said, is really to talk about something that is at its heart about children's lives and futures, child poverty in the UK. Right now, there are millions of children growing up in families who are struggling to put food on the table, to heat their homes, or to afford school uniforms. But behind every statistic is the child missing out on security and joy and an opportunity that every young person should have. So child poverty, it's not just about money. It's about children going to bed hungry, parents making impossible choices, and young people feeling excluded even before they have had the chance to thrive. And yet it's also about resilience. It's about communities pulling together, and about real possibility of change if we act with an urgency and with a compassion. Today we'll hear some stories, some insights, some practical ideas of how we can do better for the next generation. And my hope is that by the end of this session, you'll not only feel moved, but also motivated, because change starts with awareness and it grows when we act together. And later on, we hope to give you the chance maybe to respond to some of what you've heard. So if you have a question or a comment or a suggestion based on what you've heard from our contributors this evening, hold that thought, because you will get a chance to maybe air it and view it and discuss it for a few minutes closer towards the end of this webinar. So in advance of meeting our contributors, I will thank everybody for signing up. I will also say that there will be a recording of this event available to all at the end, and for those who missed out again. So just to thank you for giving your time and your heart to this conversation. So now we're going to begin. So with your permission, I'd like to introduce you to Liam Purcell, who is the CEO of Church Action on Poverty. And you might ask, well, what exactly is that? Well, I think Liam will probably tell us. It's a national ecumenical Christian society committed to tackling poverty in the UK. So I'll tell you, Liam, you have the floor. So I'll hand over to you. Thanks a million.
Thank you very much, Brian, and thanks for having me here tonight. I am new in post as Chief Executive of Church Action on Poverty. I just started in July, but I have been working for Church Action on Poverty for 17 years. As handling communications, and I think I have met a lot of you at NJPN conferences and giving talks in churches around the country, so it's nice to be here again tonight. As Brian said, Church Action on Poverty is an ecumenical organisation that's been working since 1982. We have always had a focus on tackling the root causes of poverty, the unjust structures in society which trap and sweep people into poverty. And our work's based on the belief that every person is made in the image of God and deserves life in all its fullness. And we say that poverty in a rich country is a denial of that vision. And especially when that is accompanied, as it is often in the UK, by narratives of blame and stigma, which frame poverty as a moral failing of people rather than something caused by structural injustice, structural sin. So a big part of our work is trying to challenge those narratives with stories of hope, which is one of the things I want to try and bring today. You would have thought that child poverty would be a good place to focus when trying to change people's minds about poverty and make them support action to tackle poverty, because usually that narrative of stigma and blame is very difficult to apply to children. You can't say that it's a child's fault that they're in poverty. Whether that actually played out as what positively as we'd hope is can be more of a challenge than we realise or we expect. But I wanted to talk today. I'm going to talk first about one of the key opportunities and the key drivers of child poverty and an opportunity we have to tackle that in terms of policy. And then I want to talk a bit about how we approach these things and how Church Action on Poverty's values come into play when we talk about child poverty. What we would say right now, as we're coming up to the publication of a new child poverty strategy, the single most important issue that we need to be thinking about in policy terms is the two-child limit. The two-child limit means families aren't allowed to access support through universal credit or child tax credit for more than two children if those children are born after April 2017, when the limit was first introduced by the previous government. There has never been a restriction on siblings like this before that within the UK social security system. It was opposed very, very early on by church leaders and anti-poverty charities. And quite apart from economic arguments, we've always said it's simply wrong for the government to provide differing levels of support to children based on whether they happen to have siblings or not. Dozens of bishops and other faith leaders wrote to the government on the policy's first anniversary, calling for it to be scrapped. And we saw another wave of opposition to it in the autumn last year in the run-up to Rachel Reeves's first autumn statement. Save the Children talk about the policy as a sibling tax, which is a way we've always talked about it, as well as a sibling penalty or sibling tax. In terms of the numbers, the government's own figures show that 1.6 million children in 440,000 households are living in families affected by the cap. The number of siblings who are denied support as a result of the policy increases every year as more people become affected by it. And affected families miss out on £3,455 a year. Experts across the anti-poverty sector, such as the End Child Poverty Coalition and Save the Children, have estimated that ending the restriction would immediately lift 300,000 children out of poverty, and it would redirect £1.3 billion of withheld support to families and make an enormous difference straight away. So it's one of the most significant things we could do to tackle child poverty, and it's hard to see how we could meaningfully tackle child poverty without addressing it. Our churches, as I said, have always been among the most vocal critics of the policy, particularly the Catholic Bishops' Conference. So they issued a really strong statement about that, and they're likely to do so again in the coming months, I think. A lot of us are stepping up our efforts now because the government's due to publish its child poverty strategy in the autumn, as I said, and significant numbers of Labour MPs would support removing the limit. So there is a chance here for us to make a difference and push that across the line. We're likely to mobilise churches to speak out on this in the coming months. We published an open letter last year that was signed by over 300 church leaders. So if you would be interested in being part of that, you can sign up at Church Action on Poverty's website and get your church to support action when we do that again later in the autumn. Likely there will be actions announced by the Catholic Bishops' Conference as well, so if you follow them. So that's kind of a big policy issue that I think it's worth making sure everybody knows about. What I wanted to do, secondly, is to talk about our values and our way of working at Church Action on Poverty. We always refer back to our core values when we think about how to respond to an issue, and we talk about the importance of dignity and agency and power. And we would say that government policy is trapping children in poverty because it doesn't look to ensure that equal dignity and agency and power for everyone. And most importantly, the voices of people in poverty, and especially of children and young people, are rarely heard by politicians. But we know from our work that when children and other people in poverty get a chance to speak, they can be really powerful agents of change. So I wanted to share a little video story from our work of some young people that we worked with campaigning on hunger and poverty a few years ago. And I'd say this is a really good example of throwing open the doors and allowing people to participate and have a voice. So I'm just going to play that, and then I've got a couple of links to share before I hand over to the next speaker. Going to see if the sharing screen works. There we go.
It should work for you there. Let me have it. Yeah, lovely.
There we go.
Did you share
Is that,
sound? You did?
yeah, is that looking okay? Can everyone
That
see
looks
that?
great.
Okay?
That looks wonderful. Thanks, Liam.
Right, okay, I'll press play.
My favourite food is lasagna because my grandma makes it from homemade.
I'm not sure actually, it could be rather spaghetti bolognese or McDonald's.
My favourite food is McDonald's.
My favourite food is chicken. I've just told you that 3 times.
When we can't access food, it's a bit sad because when you're hungry, you get a bit like mad and everything, or well I do, and then you just go in a mood all day and just want food.
Their expression is they're hangry. Like, because they're hungry, they get really angry, so they start kicking off, saying, oh, this, that and the other, and then they start going into details like, you don't know what I'm going through. And the teachers go, yeah, I know I don't, but that doesn't change your behaviour. But it actually does. It really does.
Well, when I used to think food poverty, I used to think about the adverts that you see on TV, but now that I've learnt about it, it's like happens all around me, and I know I've experienced it.
Some people like are in really bad situations where their mum and their dad work, so they're out at 7 o'clock in the morning, so they've got to go to school, might get a free meal at school, come back, have no tea, wait till the next day, starving throughout the day until it comes to about dinner time to get another meal again.
I think to tackle food poverty, like our school does, to get more involved, look at people's personal experiences, and the government should try help as well.
I just thought other people were going through it because it's just one of them. Like, you go through life and you have the struggles and then you have your good times, but I thought that was just normal. And then as soon as I came, like, finding out what food poverty was, I was like, wow, I was going through that, and I thought everyone else was.
When people have a non-uniform day at school, you have to pay £1 to come in non-uniform, and the teachers make it out like it's the easiest thing because everyone has £1, but sometimes the parent can't give someone £1 just to go into non-uniform because they might need that £1 for a loaf of bread or something like that, but some teachers don't really understand.
It's easier for people to like share their experiences. Like with the free school meal situation, I used to be terrified to go up and get my free school meals because I felt like people would look at me and think, oh, that's disgusting, she's dead poor, she don't bring money to school. I didn't bring money to school, I had no money to bring to school. But now, if someone says, why are you getting free school meals, I'll go, listen, I'm grateful to actually get free meals off school, considering I can't bring money to school, so I can't just be left starving all day.
Not a lot of adults understand that children actually go through food poverty. Like, again, with the teachers don't understand that if their parents going through it, then the child's going through it as well.
Ever since I've been working on the workshops and I've been to all these meetings, it just makes sense completely. Say if I shared my experience, it might encourage other people to share theirs, and it might lift the weight off their shoulders if they talk to someone about it.
I got involved in food poverty because I had my own personal experiences, and I think the stigma around food poverty should be changed. Anyone can have it, even if you live in a nice house and things like that. You have a nice car, you can still not be able to afford a meal, or even if you've got rich parents but they don't have enough time to take to get food and fill the cupboards and stuff like that.
My mum's got epilepsy, so she can't go near any pots or pans. She can't cook because if she has a fit near the pans, then I thought it could even lead to death. So I know I'm cooking. I look after my brothers when she's ill. I'm actually my mum's carer. So if she needs anything, I've got to be there to do it. If my brothers need anything, I need to be there to do it. And then cooking, I can't properly cook. I don't actually know how to do it. I just stick some chicken nuggets on the grill, and mostly sometimes they burn. And every time the fire alarm goes off, my brothers just know that it's tea time.
Making our own workshops makes it easier to work around what you do. So when we go to a different school to work with it, you don't have to read something and know how to do it because you've designed it, you know what to do, and you don't really need to ask help, so it makes you look a bit more professional.
my message to other people would to be definitely getting involved, helping us share experiences, getting their own opinions across, and helping us raise awareness about it, because I bet you half of the people in the UK don't know what food poverty is. They probably are going through it themselves but don't know it because they don't know what it means.
Even though you don't have to have a title, but now you have, like, I'm in a group, Food Power, people understand more because you're in that more, you're not an individual, you're with a group of people that all feel the same, so everyone like wants to listen to what you and your friends in the group have got to say, instead of being just one person saying I want to do this, working as a group, saying you want to change this and you want to change that. More adults listen because you look professional.
So, those young people that we worked with went on to become ambassadors for the right to food, and they spoke on Channel 4 News and at events in Westminster as part of campaigns we were involved in. And you can see the difference it makes to find that you're not on your own and to have a chance to tell your story. So I'm going to share in the chat afterwards a couple of links to where you can read more stories from the Right to Food ambassadors. And End Child Poverty Coalition, which Church Action on Poverty is part of, also has a group of ambassadors, children who speak out about their experiences. So one really valuable thing you can do is listen, learn from their experiences, and try and share and amplify their voices if you can, and support what they're involved in. So I'll share that and just encourage you to think about the importance of stories and voices and hearing the voices of people with the actual experience of these issues. I'll hand over to Brian to introduce the next speaker, and I'll post those links in the chat for anyone who wants them. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you indeed, Liam, and that was really just super. And that video at the end was so informative. And your final words there: listen, learn, share, and amplify. If that was a call to action for everybody who was listening this evening, but there's so much in what you say. That idea of dignity and agency and power, and what is the voice of those with the lived experience, and then you showed us the voice, and we heard the voice of those with the lived experience. And what struck me, I suppose, was that some of the children didn't even know the extent to how much in poverty they actually were. I did have a little chuckle when a young lady said that when the fire alarm goes off, the children in the house know it's tea time. I thought that was a little bit funny, but it's, yeah, I thought, yeah, there's an awful lot in what you say. And the lifting the two-child cap, when you put it like that, when you kind of say, there's different levels of support depending on the number of siblings you have, it kind of really nails down what the effect of the two-child cap. So, Liam, thank you to you and to Church Action on Poverty, and I'm sure that people have plenty of thoughts after what they have heard today. So thank you once again indeed for everything that you have prepared and shared with us. And what we will do is the links that Liam is going to share in the chat, we will make sure to share them with the recording afterwards also. So once again, Liam, thank you indeed. I'm going to move on if that's okay, and thanks again. I'm going to introduce you to Paul Morrison, who is the policy advisor with the Joint Public Issues team. And I'm not sure if you've heard of them or if you're aware of them, but they do the most fantastic social media campaign on all sorts of issues and policy and campaigns and trying to gather our support, but very much too they're about creating a greater awareness around lots of different issues. But Paul this evening is going to talk to us a little bit about I suppose children and the issue of poverty and the work of the Joint Public Issues team. So Paul, you will probably explain it much better than I would, so I'm going to give you the floor if that's okay. Thank you indeed.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to speak to you all. And I don't know about you, but that video is sitting on my heart at this particular point in time.
Yeah.
And the sheer injustice of the two-child rule, was brought home to me when I was giving a talk quite similar to this one at a sort of working mothers group in a church in Bermondsey. And as you do, when your time is finished. I'd done my talk and they were talking now. So I just sat on the floor and played with some children, which was great until I realized that on one knee, I had a child that the state cared about. And on the other knee, I had a child that the state was abandoning, that a child who wasn't getting supported. And that's just wrong. Never mind how much poverty it causes, it is just wrong. And I'm going to share my screen. I've got a presentation for you, but it kind of starts off with a letter that was written a couple of weeks ago to the Chancellor and the Prime Minister around this child poverty strategy. And, and I can't reinforce enough to you, now is the time to talk to politicians and your MPs. Now is the time to say this is an issue you care about a great deal. Because the child poverty strategy comes along once every decade, maybe once every 2 decades. And it is going to set the sort of agenda for the next 5 years of policy. And it has the potential to make real strides forward. It has also got the potential to fizzle. And lots of MPs know what needs to be done. They care about this issue, but they don't know if anybody's walking alongside them. They don't know if this is the issue that other people care about. And now is the time to tell them it is, because the fights over this are going to happen over the next 3 or 4 months. And I'm just going to share now and see if that works. Can you see that?
Yes, thank you. Yes, absolutely.
Grand. So this was the summary that we sent out to 38 faith leaders of what the letter would say. And it says that we believe that it is possible to reduce child poverty, but it needs to be ambitious. It needs to be properly funded. And all the modeling tells us that if you leave the 2-child rule in place, basically all the other measures fall away. They don't work. They become much more expensive, and you get much less improvement in poverty if you do that, if you leave it there. And we also work with Gordon Brown and the IPP, Institute of Public Policy Research, who put forward a proposal to reform gambling taxes as a way of raising the money to end the 2-child rule. And that's what we put forward. And this is the first phrase of it. And 15 years ago, that first sentence, faith leaders across the UK, we see spiraling consequences of child poverty, would have been the bit we needed to convince the public about. Because 15 years ago, people were still denying that there was such poverty in the UK. They were also basically believed that decent people didn't become poor. That if you really put the effort in and you were a decent, hardworking individual, poverty wouldn't happen to you. It wasn't true then, but we've done a lot of polling and we've done a lot of work. And we know now the British public doesn't believe that. It believes that child poverty is happening because of structural problems within our society. But the second paragraph was, we believe this can be reversed. And today, that is the problem. Today, that is the problem, convincing people that something can be done and that there is the pressure and the will to do it and that there's the resources to do it. Because when we pull on that, people say, we know child poverty is wrong. We know that it exists, but I think it's too big a problem. And really, the rest of what I'm going to say is to try persuade you and convince you and give you the ammunition to say that it can be done. And say that it can be done. And I'm going to tell you 2 stories of the last 15 years. And the first one's one that you will not recognize, which is, so I should probably mention this. I only came to poverty work later on in life. I used to design vaccines at university, so I see the world through graphs. If you don't, it's going to be a tough next 10 minutes, but buckle in, it'll be fine. But this is how I see the world, so I'll just show where we're at. So the economy grew. we got bigger and bigger economy. There was more money in the United Kingdom. These are public data from the Office of National Statistics, that the household wealth, so the average household in the UK got wealthier and wealthier. Mainly it's in their house or their pension pot. But it goes from around 200,000 to just over 300,000. And the next wave of that study is about to report, and we know it's gone up to almost 350,000. So we have become wealthier as a nation, both cumulatively in terms of GDP growth and as families in terms of the average wealth of a family. Household incomes increased. Wages actually flatlined a bit, but incomes increased largely because pensions and investment income kept growing. So we became wealthier, we got more pay each month. And again, that trend has increased. And the other thing that happened, and you will see in the newspapers that there's this terrible problem with worklessness. We have record lows of people not working. The engagement with the labour market is high. It was at its highest in just before the pandemic, but it's at absolute record highs. Consistently, more and more and more people are working. And if you multiply that up by hours, more and more and more hours are being worked by people. So we've got this economy where you're getting more wages, more wealth, more hours, more work, more hours being worked. And the last graph is one, the last in this section is one that says that the benefit system, you will be told that there is a rocketing or skyrocketing benefit costs, or that there is skyrocketing numbers of people on benefits. The story of the last 15 years was that the number of people unemployed went down, but the number of people who were sick went up. And when you net that out, it's fairly much the same. So around about 10% of GDP is spent on benefits. Half of that goes to pensioners, half of that goes to working age families, which includes children. So you may have been told a story that everything's going badly and that we're paying through the nose for all of these in welfare, but it's just not true. It is observably not true. I'm going to tell you the second story of the last 15 years. And maybe it's one you'd expect to see. So Social Metrics Commission, which is this cross-party commission that wanted to find a way of measuring poverty in the UK, finds that there's around about 16 million people who experience poverty, and that's just over 1 in 3 children. 5.2 million is just over 1 in 3 of our children experience poverty. And when we say experience poverty, that threshold is such that if you think of the standard of living of a pensioner with no second pension and just living on state pension, that would be around about a third above the threshold of standard of living that these families are in. So this is a significant factor. This is significant deprivation and significant sort of holding back of lives. That increasingly, poverty is about being in work, but being in low pay. So there's the blue bars there are the amount of work that's done. So 3.2 million people are in poverty, despite the fact that they're in 2-parent families, that they're in 2 household families where 2 people are working. So working full time for 2 families isn't enough to stay out of poverty. And the people who are out of work, who are in poverty, it's almost exclusively people with long-term illness. That's really the only group that's left in there. And the other thing that happened was that we saw increasing hunger. So the panel on I think it will be a year left, but I'm not entirely sure. The one that's about Trussell Trust. I was a director at Trussell Trust and started in 2016, and we were serving around 1 million people. We were giving out about 1 million food parcels a year. It's about 3.5 million this year. And it absolutely skyrocketed, and that is through increased demand. The other panel is that the government measures something called food insecurity. It was actually a campaign which Liam was part of. Lots of us said you should measure how much hunger there is in the country. We need a measure of that. And eventually the government gave in. And it seems like around 7.2 million people are food insecure in the United Kingdom. And that's been increasing. And that means that at least once a month, they have to reduce or skip food. And it means that for at least 2 weeks of the month, they are concerned they may not have enough food. And that's often the thing we think about poverty as not having the thing, not having the food, or not having the good that will make life tolerable. What you see is actually it's about the worry about not having it. It's the constant nagging worry that I won't be able to feed my child tomorrow or the day after or the day after that. Even if you manage to scrape together and do it, as most do, it is that worry that eats away at you long term. And this is another measure of what's destitution. And the way what is being measured here is Joseph Rowntree Foundation went around the country and said, what do you mean by the word destitution? What do you mean by the word destitution? What is it brings to mind? And they took that from focus groups and from polling. And then they said, right, we'll go out and measure that. We'll go out and measure what the British public thinks destitution is. And at the beginning of the decade, in 2010, there was destitution, but we understood where it came from. We didn't need a global measure of it because really it was certain groups of people and we knew where to find them and we knew how to help them. But what happens over this next decade is that the help fell away. And so you have more and more people who are facing this destitution, a type of poverty we thought had been eradicated in this country, but came back. And it's a fairly extraordinary thing to say there are 1 million children experiencing destitution each year in the United Kingdom, but that is the case. And that has been allowed to happen at the same time as all of those increases in wealth and growth and everything else occurred. And this is my last graph, and I wanted to reflect on our choices. So the 0% line there is the European average. And if you're in the top 10%, you are among the top 10% people in Europe. In terms of your buying power, in terms of your overall wealth. If you're the median person in the United Kingdom, you're there or thereabouts. You're a little bit below the European average in terms of income. But if you're in the bottom 10%, you have a quarter less spending power than the European average. Somebody in the bottom 10% in Britain is poorer than somebody in the bottom 10% of Slovenia or Romania in terms of their buying power. And that is not because we don't have the money. That is because we have chosen to distribute it in this way. So the most important part of that letter was to say, we believe it is that a strategy that significantly reduces child poverty is possible. These things that I've sort of mapped out as changes over the last 15 years happened despite the fact that we were getting richer. We can choose to distribute wealth differently. We can choose to say that actually our children are our priority. We can choose to say that third children should be helped just as much as second children. all of these are choices we can make. What we need to do is convince our politicians that when they make those choices, we'll be beside them, which is why I'm saying, Church Action on Poverty have got a letter, Action for Children have got a letter. If you want to write a letter yourself, that's always better because it comes from you, and that's the sort of thing that MPs will read and will take account of. But now is the time to say that we believe it is possible and that it is necessary and it should happen. So I'll leave it there if that's okay.
Paul, thank you very much indeed for that, and for a very passionate presentation. Beginning, I suppose, with Liam's video, which, as you said yourself, stayed in your heart, I suppose. Given the topic that you were discussing. But what you really did was you kind of gave us a brief outline on how we came to be in the position that we're in. I'm reminded too of the time when Philip Alston, who was the Special Rapporteur on Poverty, visited the UK in November 2018. He was asked to do a 2-week report, and he produced a report in May. And one of the things he came back with was that, we're actually violating the human rights of children in particular. And he spoke to the proliferation of food banks, and that was 2018. So that's kind of 6 and 7 years ago now. And the government denied what he said. And the rapporteur never responds kind of openly. He leaves his report and he leaves the country. He came back on Radio 5 Live and he said, "We never come back, but I am now," he said, "because they're denying it's happening. And not only is it happening," he said, "unless they do something about it, it's set to get worse." And we saw that too during COVID, when we saw interventions from unexpected quarters like Marcus Rashford, when he spoke of child hunger during the lockdown. So there are lots of people who are very keenly interested in this particular topic. Liam, your stories are insightful. I mean, they really give us a good look at what happens. What we really like about what you said is that actually the solution is possible and that there is a way around this, and that you've actually mapped it out and showed us how. You even told us how to raise the money to lift the cap, which is super. So once again, Liam, thank you so much indeed for your presentation, and I'm delighted that we are recording this so that we can share it with others. Paul, thanks again. And we will come back to you, I'm sure. I'm sure others will have plenty to say, and there may even be questions a little bit later on. I'm going to move on for the sake of time, so I'll thank Paul once again. I would like to introduce you now to Carol Cross. And Carol is a trustee of the Cause Foundation, helping families across Teesside. And they organise an annual Christmas hamper campaign and holiday hunger campaigns, and February half term, Easter, summer holidays, and bags of food are provided to schools for distribution to families, giving a little bit extras to support and feed children during holidays. And that, I suppose, is the mention of Marcus Rashford again. Also responding to crisis requests, enabling families to receive items such as furniture and bedding and clothes and different things like that. So I'm going to hand over to Carol. She's probably best placed to tell you a little bit more about who they are, what they do, why they do it, and the difference it makes to those families. Carol's story is a little bit different from Paul and Liam's in the sense it's not as much about the policy really as about what we're actually hearing on the ground in terms of a grassroots response to the issues that have been alluded to by Liam and by Paul. So Carol, I'll hand over to you. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thanks for your introduction. You've pinched a lot of my script. So if you can bear with me, I'd just like to go back a ways because Cause came about in 1987. Following a pastoral assembly on unemployment that was part of a number of social inquiries instigated by the Bishop of Middlesbrough, Augustine Harris. And my husband and I were invited to participate in organising the event, which was planned and presented by unemployed people. So we were guided by 2 priests, the late and great Father Peter Keeling, who was a diocesan priest, and Father Ed O'Connell, who's a Columban missionary priest who had recently returned from Peru. So in the months leading up to the assembly, we followed a process known as the pastoral cycle. You start with experience, and then you analyse, you reflect on it, and you take action, come up with points of action. So we shared our experiences through tears and laughter, because at the time David was out of work and we had 4 children under the age of 10. We identified the causes, who was doing what to who and why. And that was really startling to learn what the social structures of the country was like and what the economic programs were doing. We reflected on what we learned through scripture and the Catholic social teachings and found that they were quite condemnatory of this situation that people were in, on purpose, I think. And then we identified actions that we could take in response. So we shared our findings with our diocesan community, and the group who planned it stayed together and shared it around the country to raise awareness and change attitudes, because at the time people were victimised for being unemployed, saying that they wouldn't work even if they could work, and there's plenty of jobs around, and but there wasn't. When we gave our presentation, a local school teacher, Pat McBride, she said she would organise hampers to be put together by children in the school. So each class adopted a family and prepared a hamper of food and gifts for them. And in that first year, 25 hampers were delivered to needy families. So to go on to the Cause Foundation, the hamper campaign has continued every year since that year. And year on year, the numbers in need have increased, growing exponentially. So if I thought it was bad in 1987, I'd hate to think what it's like for people living in poverty now. We realised that help was needed throughout the year and not just at Christmas. So we began responding to requests from social workers for children who were in crisis. Initially, that was for food, but as more people were affected by benefit cuts, their needs increased. So over the years, the hamper campaign has grown, and last year, 1,852 hampers were provided for families and individuals. And that was only the tip of an iceberg. We start organising in September, when we ask people via our website and social media pages to provide a hamper for a family. Then we match them with a family nominated by a social worker or a school. For 6 years, our football club, Middlesbrough, have kindly allowed us the use of their stadium as a base to help with collecting the hampers that have been donated, and for the social work teams to collect them and deliver them to the families. It's a massive undertaking that we couldn't do without the help of an army of volunteers for a week in December. Now, bed poverty is another big issue. Children sleeping on the floor or on mattresses. Since January, we've had over 260 crisis requests, almost one per day. The majority are for beds, but we also provide cots, toddler beds, bunk beds, safety gates, food vouchers, wardrobes, drawers, household items and school uniforms. And as you said, we run the holiday hunger scheme for half-term holidays when children aren't at school and won't get the free school meal. We also help young people who are 17 to 25-year-olds who are leaving care and moving into their own accommodation, and they need help to furnish that. So how do we do it? Well, we became a registered charity in 2021. And through the generosity of people who give freely of their time and donate regularly to our organisation, we've been sponsored by a local business as their charity of the year, especially and particularly for the bed poverty. And staff help out with the hamper campaign too. So different staff are allowed to work for a charity for a day, and many of them choose to come along and help with the hampers. We organise fundraising events ourselves throughout the year. So we have afternoon teas and a spring event. We've held a cause ball and we have charity nights as well. So that brings in some funding for us. I've rapidly come towards the end, but that's fine because I think I've said everything I want to say. But since we began, we've acted in faith. When a need arises, a response comes to meet it. And the greater the need, the greater the response has been. And that has been something we've witnessed year on year over many years now. So this will be our 38th year of doing hampers. And even though we know that we'll be inundated with requests, we know that there'll be people who will respond. And that's something I like to think of as a little miracle. I'm proud to play a part in that. But I would just like to say thank you to both Liam and to Paul for the work that they're doing in bringing these issues before politicians, because they're the ones who can change the way things are for the people that we're helping. There are lots of reasons why people are in poverty. Some of it is that they can't work. Some of it's because they're sick. Some of it's because of family breakdown. Some of it's because of deaths. But we try not to judge. We just respond when we're asked to. And hopefully that helps. So I'd just like to say thank you for inviting me to come along and be part of this tonight. It's taken me back a long way, because we spent 6 years when my husband was unemployed. And you never forget an experience like that. You know, it leaves an imprint on you that you just are always touched by when you hear of people going through similar things nowadays. So thank you.
Actually, Carol, I would say thank you. And I think everybody that's watching and listening to this evening has been moved by what you say. Firstly, to thank you so much for sharing of your own experience. And really, I suppose what you have referred to as what Liam and Paul have been telling us is that the problem is getting worse, that the numbers are going up, and that the problem is becoming more and more intractable, given that we now have people who are working 2 jobs but still can't make those ends meet. And you began by saying that you began by preparing 25 hampers all those years ago, but now the numbers are huge, and that one crisis a day, a bed crisis a day, and it just sounds as though wherever there is a need, you will do what you can to respond to it. The United Kingdom in 2015 signed up to the Sustainable Development Goals, and the very first one of those was no poverty, and the second one was no hunger. And, it is failing on those 2. But one principle that they tried to live with, or one of the underlying principles of the Sustainable Development Goals, was to leave no one behind. And you live that, you actually live it. Not only that, but you are reaching the furthest behind first, which is the practice of the Sustainable Development Goals. You are one of the quiet heroes, and you're talking about thanking Liam and Paul, and absolutely, and there are quite a number. I work with the Presentation Sisters in Ireland and England, and we have this idea of a 2-feet approach, where one foot is the foot that actually practically assists and helps and responds to need, but the other foot is the foot that is advocating for change so that the need isn't necessary. So there is a part for everybody to play. So it's fortuitous that you came in after Liam and Paul, because you really did kind of speak to their work by giving of your own experience. So your generosity is really as powerful. Your testimony has been powerful, and I think both our previous speakers spoke of the spoken word and the lived experience, and the person speaking with that dignity. You have that dignity in spades, and I can see how it would pass to somebody else you might have. Carol, thank you so much indeed for the kindness of your presence this evening and the power of your presence once again. And I can see people clapping in silence. You can't hear them because they're all on mute. I did that. I muted them all. But Carol, thank you so much indeed for your kind presentation. So there you have it, folks. What we have now is we have had three presentations, all very, very different, but equally inspiring. I can see Imelda there has said how it is inspiring. The video is inspiring. How the facts and figures have alerted us to the difficulty at hand. We're being called to action in terms of the strategy that's coming out now, and that maybe we can speak to our MPs about saying, do you know what, this is a problem that can be fixed, should be fixed, must be fixed, and that we can play our part. We have seen there's a practical response that Carol has alerted us to, and maybe we can do something there. There is donating time, donating money, but also local businesses getting involved in how we do what we do. So we're making good time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that awful thing of breaking people into breakout groups for no longer than 10 minutes. And if you happen to be in a room with 5 or 6 others, because I know there are some communities sitting there watching this now, and the point really is just to even think on what is it that stays with you after having heard your contributors this morning or this evening? What surprises you about what you've heard and what you think we can do? So what stays with you, what surprises you, and what do you think we can do? And we'll give you 10 minutes when we come back. You might take a note of the group you're in, because it'll say group 1, 2, 3. And then afterwards, if you had one person who might give us even less than a minute because of time, and we'll try and keep to time. So I'm going to go straight into those groups and give you a few minutes and we'll come back to you then and we'll see where we're at. So thank you very much indeed, and we'll be back to you in about 10 minutes. It's now coming up on 27 minutes past 8, and we'll come back to you just before 20 to 9, and we'll take it from there. Thanks a million.
Brian, can you hear me? I think you're muted.
Sorry, yes, Paul, I can hear you. Yep.
It says when I try to turn on my video that it's disabled by host, which I fully understand. I'm no oil painting.
Did I do something? Hold on. I'll just check now. Allow or remove permission, put in waiting room. If I say ask to start video, does that help?
Yeah. Well, hey, that works.
Okay, perfect.
Fantastic.
Okay,
Thank you.
Okay, yeah.
Cheers.
Thank you, Paul. That was really, really, really good. And actually the three contributions have really complemented each other, and each one kind of adds to the story of the previous and prefaces the story of the next. It's worked out really well.
Yeah. Okay. I will go and join the room. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paul. I wonder how we frozen. There are a number of us here. For some reason, we seem to be kind of stuck here. I don't know whether you can join a group or not, but I'm not sure if anybody would like to speak. Some people may be away from the machine, but if anybody would like to make a comment on anything that they've heard at all, we can carry it back to the main group. Pamela or Liz or Mary or Jackie or Anne. Helen. Grace. Bit by bit, people are winding their way back into the main room. I think pretty much we have everybody there. It is always a case as soon as you say breakout room, some people go, "Oh my God, I'm out of here. I'll have to say something," and they run for the heights. And that is the case. We always lose a few, but the recording is there, and I know some people have come on just for the recording as such. What I'm actually going to do, just again, is um, I'm going to mute everybody. I think just when you went into your groups, um, some of you obviously unmuted. You needed to do it because you were going to speak. But when I looked at the groups, the groups had 5 or 6, and most of the groups had 5 or 6, and that wasn't such a bad number. It wasn't too big. But I'm hoping you got a few minutes or a chance even to have a little go. And the room for kind of 1 to 10. But is there anybody who might like to maybe kick us off and tell us, just give us a little bit about what struck them? And if you want to just unmute and give us a moment, and we'll just go around the room and we'll see how we get on. We have maybe 10 minutes. Anybody'd like to start us off there?
Okay, I'll kick off. We
Sue,
decided that
thank you.
we were definitely going to write to MPs with lots of the material that we've been given, stories we could tell, fantastic fund of information that we can use to make our letters more affecting. We've talked about raising awareness. This is probably not answering the questions you suggested. We raise awareness with family, especially if we've got family who are doing quite well, but are so busy doing their own lives, they don't think about people who might not have as much. When we get material relating to these issues, that we read it and think about it, and pray about it and see what we can do. There was, oh yes, of course, and we mustn't forget Poverty Sunday, which is coming up shortly. I'm sure Liam will be telling us about it. That's
Brilliant.
it.
That's great. Thank you indeed. So I'm just adding a word to what I think it was Liam had said: listen, learn, share, amplify voices, and we'll add the word pray in after that as well. So that kind of rounds it off. Thank you indeed, Sue. Is there anybody else might like to tell us a little bit about what they've spoken, or add maybe to what Sue has said, if that's okay? Go ahead, Imelda. Yeah.
Just a point that came because there was one of ours from the northeast, and I worked in the northeast for years in social housing, and our other member was from Ireland. But we did look at and wondered whether anybody has done any real analysis of the north-south divide and child poverty, because the northeast is, it seems to me, listening tonight, to be in a very stark reality of deterioration in the numbers and even resources to serve the poor, child born family poverty.
That's a fair point. Thanks indeed, Imelda. Imelda is coming in from Tirana this evening. So thank you indeed, Imelda, in Albania.
There was the report, Imelda, Child of the North, I think about 3 years ago. It was published, a parliamentary report, which was quite powerful, gave all the statistics that explained how children in the North had poorer chances. But it doesn't seem to have made a lot of difference, sadly.
Thank you, Pat. Yeah. Anybody else like to tell us a little bit about what came up for them and their group?
Well, there were 3 people from the north, Group 6 that I was in, and I was struck by how poverty is so much more evident in their face than it is where I live down in Guildford. And it makes it incumbent on me to be far more attentive to what's happening elsewhere. But one thing that was made clear is that the fact that we've got food banks should not let the government off the hook. That they might want to allow food banks to become the norm, but this is not how we want to run our country. And that was stated very, very strongly.
Thank you, Kevin. Indeed, absolutely, it is a point. And actually, as you speak, it is exactly the point that you speak about in where you live. That, as Pat and Imelda have said, it's very different elsewhere. And I remind of what Sue said a little bit earlier about it being a case that to raise awareness amongst the family, amongst those who are doing well, because sometimes others don't realise that even though you're doing well, others just aren't. And raising that simple awareness too makes that difference. So Kevin, thank you indeed for your contribution this evening. Anybody else?
One of the problems, Brian, we have, I'm from the Northeast, I was in Imelda's group. And hello there, everybody. One of the points I was keen to make is that where I live in South Teesside, which is a very, very poor local authority,
absolutely,
we have now 7 food banks, and we can no longer provide for the food banks because the people in general are very poor. So although our churches are very generous, the people who go to our churches and have been supporting these food banks now for 4, 5, 6 years, they themselves don't have very much money either. So we now keep running out of food in our food banks.
Yeah. That's not only an experience in Tyneside. It is actually quite common, and even people are being told, "You're coming to the food bank too long," and that doesn't mean they don't need to. They still need to. So they might be told you'll have to go to the food pantry or to the church hall, or there's a different service. So there's now almost grades of service in terms of food banks. Thank you indeed, Bernadette. An important point that you make there indeed. Yeah, that it is actually in many cases those who are nearly poor serving those who really are poor. Yeah, it's a strange dilemma we're in. Thank you, Bernadette. Anybody else like to add to anything there?
Yes, we mentioned Rerum Novarum, and it says families and people must get a living wage. And that living wage hasn't kept up because the cost of living has been raised. So it is very necessary that this be reviewed again so that there is a living wage for people.
Absolutely. Thank you indeed, Teresa, for that. And I suppose that goes to the point that Paul was talking about when he's saying that really there are so many people working, and 2 in family working, and still struggling to make ends meet. So it's like, how are they ever going to manage? And that really those who are so strong. But even when you think about it, Paul mentioned, how could we be even thinking of measuring hunger? Like, why would a country like the UK even think of measuring hunger? Or even measuring destitution? You would think that there are measurements that should and could be taken in different countries, not in the UK. But thank you, Teresa, indeed, for that. Anybody else? Miriam, go ahead there. Yeah, you need to unmute, Miriam. You're still muted, Miriam.
Sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead. That's okay.
I think Teresa Horgan took a bit of my point of view, but this is the bit I want to say. We had Paul Morrison in our group, and he said that what the British government have done is they've taken the minimum wage and now made it into the living wage, which is horrific, really, because it hasn't gone up at all.
Yeah.
And yet they're getting away with it.
Yeah, that's true. But even the notion of supporting some children, I think Paul mentioned at the very beginning, he spoke about sitting with a group of children, and on the one hand, one child in the same group is being supported by the state while the other child is not being supported by the state. So the state is discriminating who it looks after, just based on the fact that there might be more than two children in a family. They will not support families with more than two children in the family, and that cap needs to be lifted. That's the point that's kind of been made quite strongly, and that the new poverty strategy that's due, that at its central tenet, this is what we're asking for. This is what people are asking for, and I think Paul has made the point several times that now is our chance and our time to speak up, say our piece, and explain where we're coming from. Anybody else have a final word? Okay, well, I'll tell you, look, so much has been said. It sounds like we got a lot discussed, and we did want to give people the opportunity even to discuss with others what they'd heard, or even to ask a question in a group if they felt they didn't quite catch some of what was said in the presentations this evening. We're very, very grateful to all of you for staying with us and being part of our evening this evening. We're grateful to Paul and to Carol and to Liam for their presentation. I am going to tell you that what we have prepared will be a recording that we will send to all who have registered, which will include yourselves. So you'll be able to look at yourselves on the television. Won't that be good? You'll be stars in your own sitting rooms, and you'll be able to share this. So the call to action tonight really, I suppose, is to talk about what you've heard with those who didn't attend, and maybe to share the video with somebody who you think might need to know it or share on it, and maybe even bring it up in spaces where you are, whether it's church groups or justice, peace and integrity of creation groups, or local groups, or groups that can help or make that difference, or groups who do things for other people, or groups who should do things for other people. So with that in mind, I'm going to call on Anne Peacey now, who is the chair of the National Justice and Peace Network. And I'm going to ask Anne if she would just offer a word of thanks to those who contributed and those who attended, and maybe to finish with a little reflection, and we will finish before time. Imagine that, finishing before time. Anne, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Brian. Well, I'd just like to say thank you so much to everyone for joining the meeting this evening. And I'm sure we've got a great deal to think about following all that we've heard. Sometimes it's easy to lose hope, and difficult to maintain the joy of the gospel and the feeling of hope. But the fact that so many of us have signed in tonight and showed a concern is a cause, for hope. So I'd like especially to thank Liam and Paul and Carol for sharing both their knowledge and their vast experience with us, and the stories that we've heard, which speak to us so powerfully. And we're thinking about, one of the images that springs to mind is the child one child on each knee. It's like the scales are so unevenly balanced for people in our society. And the other image is the children not having a bed to sleep in. That's just so heartbreaking. So thank you to all of you for sharing your experiences. And a special thanks must go to Brian, who has done the bulk of the preparation for this evening's event and has managed the technology with great enthusiasm and expertise. So thank you, Brian. NJPN is indeed lucky that you're part of the exec and one of our trustees. So I hope you found this session informative, and as Brian says, please share. It's certainly been challenging for me, and I'm sure for most of you. And there have been signs of hope and full of possibilities. Another thing that struck me was when it was said that we need, our MPs and our elected representatives need to know who's walking alongside them, who is walking with them. We're so often, it's them and us. They don't know what we think. They're not interested in the ordinary people. But the image of us walking alongside our elected representatives and giving them support and saying, yes, you need to be speaking up about this, and we will stand up and support you. So I think that's a very powerful image as well. So thank you very much to everyone for joining, and we'd warmly invite you to be part of the rest of our meetings for the remainder of this Jubilee year. And then most importantly, as we continue our pilgrimage of hope, when the holy doors are closed, we hope that we can continue opening doors for our brothers and sisters who are less fortunate than ourselves, wherever they may be. And one of the things in our statement at the beginning of the Jubilee year NJPN resolved to open wide the doors, and we heard again tonight the very important phrase, so that no one is left behind. And in a society as wealthy as ours, it's scandalous that so many people, and particularly children, are being left behind. And I think just a very short reflection to end with. When we think a child, a precious gift to each and every one of us, and our hope for the future. And ours is the responsibility and challenge to work for a world where all children are safe, with a place to call home, where they're loved and nurtured, and where they may grow and develop into the unique person each one is created to be. And I have to finish by saying our focus for this evening has been children living in the UK. However, we cannot speak about children without keeping in our thoughts and our prayers the children of Gaza, Sudan, Yemen, and all children who are prevented from simply being children because of conflict and violence, where they are the most innocent of victims. So we pray for all our children, those living in poverty in this country, and children living in poverty and conflict areas, and for their families. And I'd just like to finish with prayer taken from a book called Intercessions for a Hurting World by Nick Fawcett. And we pray that the day will come when this world's bounty will be shared more fairly, when no one needs to live in poverty, when opportunity is truly open to all, and no one is condemned to starvation, disease, need, or despair. So let us continue to reach out to all who are poor, and we pray that they will be given hope through our actions. Amen.
Amen. Thank you indeed, Anne, and thanks once again to all of you for sticking with us. We are 2 minutes shy of 9 o'clock, so we did this quite well, 7:30 till 9. So we will just, if you want to unmute, if you want to have a chat for a couple of minutes, we'll leave the line open for a few minutes, but we will stop the record there, I think, so that